in terms of the psychological screening we put folks through, yeah, I first just interviewed people casually, informally. Are you on psychiatric medications? Have you ever been depressed? Have you ever been psychotic? Have you ever made a suicide attempt? Have you had any, major problems with drugs like cocaine, alcohol, out of control, sort of maladaptive sort of drug use? Yeah, and once they got through that kind of generic, broad screening, half a dozen questions, then we interviewed them with a fairly long questionnaire called the SKID, which is like 100. It's like 100 pages of sort of standardized questions, and it's intended to determine if somebody is either currently or in their or either currently or in the past had undergone episode of depression or psychosis or panic disorder, those kinds of things. Yeah, we really didn't screen anybody out once they got through even the initial informal interview that I had with them. We could fine tune if somebody had been depressed in the past. And if people had been depressed in the past, that wouldn't necessarily exclude them, especially if it had been a number of years, if they had worked it through, if they weren't in similar situation that might lend themselves to getting depressed in the future. Like if somebody gotten depressed after they had lost a job and broken up with their partner, then that's understandable. And if they currently were employed happily and if they were enjoying their job and happily in a current relationship, in those sort of situations, it would seem like they weren't really prone to be developing another sort of depression subsequently. Yeah, and also I wanted to make certain that the volunteers had a strong, support system around them. If they were kind of schizoid types that just worked at night and slept during the day, had no friends, drank a lot of coffee, those folks didn't really seem like appropriate candidates either, because I knew they would need a lot of support as a result of participating in the study. And if they had no support, then I was not so comfortable in including them. I asked people if they were involved in any kind of meditation practice or any kind of psychological therapy, because I figured those types would be a little more introspective and would be a bit more stable, could manage the experience a little more stably. Yeah, and actually, as it turned out, those of the volunteers who had an ongoing meditation practice seemed a lot more capable of negotiating through some of the unusual spaces they found themselves in, just because of their mental training, that they were able to sustain their focus a little bit more than those without that kind of training in meditation. So once they got through the psychological screening, everybody went through a physical examination, heart rate, blood pressure, cardiogram. I knew giving DMT was going to be a stress on the heart. It was going to raise blood pressure and pulse, especially as an injection. So I made certain everybody had normal blood pressure and their cardiogram was normal. There was one guy actually whose blood pressure was a little high and his cardiogram was a little off. It wasn't like an abnormal EKG, but it was just not quite exactly normal. And this fellow,
prior to taking DMT,
in the screening process, his blood pressure was a titch high and his EKG was just slightly askew, and he really wanted to be in the study. So within the next 6 months, he lost 20 pounds, started exercising, stopped smoking, stopped eating salt, and he had a totally normal EKG, and his blood pressure was fine, and he made an appointment with his own cardiologist to give him a clean bill of health. That guy was the one whose blood pressure went through the roof in our study. Once he became involved with the project, but and that was one of the kind of slips in the screening, in the screening process. If so even if somebody was, even if somebody had a normal blood pressure, if there was a history of high blood pressure, I ought to have screened them out. And most of the time I did, but in this particular case, this man slipped through. Yeah, and we made certain that people weren't anemic, that their blood count was fine, and that their thyroid was fine. Yeah, actually, we discovered a couple of people with abnormal thyroid function as a result of our screening procedures, and screened them out and referred them back to their primary care docs.